Hard time forgiving, even harder forgetting. Before you do something, you might regret, friend.
My home was beautiful.
This week in game news, there were quite a few announcements, new releases, trailers, and the occasional controversy. We'll be talking about them, and we'll also be announcing the winner of our last giveaway, as well as announcing the start of a new one. This is the Blackman and Robin Game News Update. This week, we saw a lot of game deals. The Humble Weekly Bundle Multiplayer Mayhem launched, and it includes the Dinosaur Co-op Shooter Primal Carnage, the Early Access RTS Void, and the Multiplayer Shooter God Mode. All that is in the Pay What You Want tier. If you beat the average, you'll get God Factory Wingman, a fantastic space MOBA, the gladiatorial game Blade Symphony, and the adorable co-op platformer Chariot. If you pay $10 or more, you'll get the Homebrew Vehicle Sandbox. I can personally vouch for God Factory Wingman. It's a very interesting sort of game. Imagine, if you will, Dota, but more of a space dogfighting game. Everybody has these speedy little spaceships, and they're dashing back and forth between their big spaceship bases in order to defend their own and to attack the enemies. I've also had my eye on Void for a while. Now, Void is still in early access, but I really like the game's premise. It's an RTS about, according to the description, a bioorganic infestation drone which crash lands on a planet which allows primitive life forms to mutate and develop special abilities. Besides having an interesting premise, I have heard very good things about the game thus far. If you've been looking for new multiplayer games, you'll definitely want to check out this bundle. Most of the games in this bundle boast online multiplayer, however, a couple of them have either LAN or local multiplayer. If you'd like to give to charity, support indie devs, and get some great games all at the same time, check out the current weekly Humble Bundle. Meanwhile, over on BundleStars.com, the Indie Legends bundle is going on. This is a bundle mostly focusing on very well-received indie games, and it boasts Monaco, What's Yours Is Mine, Speedrunners, SteamWorld Dig, Guacamelee, Super Turbo Championship Edition, Dive Kick, Kingdom Rush, Gianna Sisters Twisted Dreams, and The Fall. Right now, the bundle is going for $3.99, which is a fantastic price for any one of these games. Personally, I'm a big fan of SteamWorld Dig. I played the game when it first came out on the Nintendo 3DS. It's a very interesting sort of Metroidvania with steampunk robots and lots of digging. If you can imagine a Metroid game meeting the digging mechanics of Terraria, well, you have a basic idea of SteamWorld Dig. Frankly, I think the bundle is worth owning just for SteamWorld Dig alone. However, all the other games are fantastic. If you're looking for a nice diverse blend of games, check this one out. Finally, over on Steam, a roguelike game sale is being held. The sale runs until Monday at around 10 AM Pacific Time. I'm not going to go into detail about every single game, but there are a few standouts. For starters, FTL Faster Than Light, an old favorite of mine, is going for 75% off at $2.50. In case you've not heard of FTL, all you need to know is that it's a roguelike in which you control a ship, and you control the ship's passengers. You jump between star systems, and your goal is to make it from one end of the galaxy all the way to the other, carrying some very important information in order to help end a war. FTL's roguelike element is in its randomness in its jumps. You never know what kind of enemy you're going to encounter, if it is an enemy, every time you jump between star systems. The game makes good use of real-time tactics elements, as well as calling for some careful crew management. Another interesting roguelike that's currently on sale that I really love is Risk of Rain. Risk of Rain is actually a roguelike platformer, in which you are stranded on a hostile alien world, and you must fight to survive. Along the way, you'll pick up all sorts of upgrades, drones that'll help you survive, and will probably wind up dying many, many times before you reach the end. Another game in this current sale that I recommend is called Steam Marines. Now, full disclosure, I did get to write a story for the game. This story is currently included in the game's files, so if you purchase Steam Marines, you will have a story by yours truly. So with that important bit of disclosure out of the way, I definitely can recommend Steam Marines. It's a very tough roguelike in which you command a squad of sort of steampunk space marines. You are traversing your ship, which has been besieged by aliens. Keep in mind that when one of the members of your squad dies, you're not getting him back until you completely restart the game. If everybody dies, well, it's game over. Of course, you're not completely powerless. Along the way, there are items to pick up, and you can also take advantage of the environment in order to avoid getting murdered. Another game in the sale is Sunless Sea. While I haven't yet played that one, I have heard very good things about it. It's been compared to FTL, Faster Than Light, but with a more text-heavy focus. It's set in the world of Fallen London, which is a little bit Lovecraft, a little bit steampunk, and very creepy. If you're looking for a roguelike that's heavy on world building, has a fair amount of emphasis on trade and resource management, and you don't mind reading lots and lots of text, you may want to check out Sunless Sea. These aren't the only games in the sale, just a few standouts. Be sure to check out the sale for yourself over on Steam before the weekend's up. One of the games that's been released this week on Steam is called Convoy. It's a game that's been described as Mad Max meets FTL, and in the game, you must journey through a wasteland in order to find parts of your spaceship. The thing is, this wasteland is a very dangerous place. There are raiders to beware, there are warring factions, and of course, there's permadeath, so if you die, you're gonna have to start all over again. The game is definitely on my to-play list, and I've heard very good things about it from both critics and fans. Besides the interesting sounding gameplay, I also really like the look of the game. It wears its inspiration from FTL on its sleeve, and it looks good. As fate would have it, there actually is a Mad Max video game set to come out. A fresh gameplay trailer has been unveiled that shows off the core mechanics. The game apparently focuses on customizing cars with scrap you find in a wasteland for the sake of vehicular combat. You also fight off bandits with combat that looks a little bit deadlier than that in the Batman Arkham series. And if you want to survive the desert, it's necessary to make alliances with some rather colorful characters. The game is set to come out on September 1st, 2015 for the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and PC. I have to say that it does look a lot better than earlier speculation made it out to be. While it certainly does seem conceptually solid and totally not a rip-off of Fallout, we have yet to see how it turns out. Released this week on Steam was Assassin's Creed Chronicles, China. It's a 2.5D platformer that plays a bit like a cross between Prince of Persia and Mark of the Ninja. While the game's art style is absolutely gorgeous, it's not really that impressive in other areas. Most critics mark the game as mediocre, having a very weak story and just average gameplay. Plenty of fans were disappointed. In case you're not familiar with the Assassin's Creed series, all you need to know is that it's a series in which you go back in time and stab a bunch of dudes. One thing that the series is famed for, however, is having beautiful environments. Fans of the Assassin's Creed franchise have long been clamoring for a game set in China. This game, however, doesn't quite sate the request. So while the game's not terrible, it's not really the best entry in the series. A bit of a lost opportunity, really. It's currently available on PC and is coming to PS4 and Xbox One later in the year. If anything, it had great music in its trailer.
Down one by one. Bring light back to my home.
Currently available in early access on Steam is Trine Free. In case you've not heard of it, the Trine series is a series of platformers in which you swap between free characters with differing abilities. While Trine Free is currently available on early access for PC, it is set to be released on everybody's favorite consoles later this year. Another early access game to hit Steam this week is called The Cosmos Is Mine. It's a humorous RTS set in an alternate 1950s universe in which players take control of a space mining team and wage war against their fellow capitalists. While the premise of the game appeals to my inner imperialist, I really do like the way that it looks. The game's cutesy aesthetic kind of belies its dark sense of humor, which I like. It reminds me, in a way, of Planetary Annihilation, but with a little bit of the visual flair lifted from Besiege. As for games that are soon to come to Steam, there's Axiom Verge, which now has a PC release date of May 14, 2015. Now, Axiom Verge is a Metroidvania. Really, it's a love letter to the original Metroid. It's almost indistinguishable from a Metroid game, really, in all but the graphics department. In fact, if you were to swap out the game's protagonist with Samus and told most Metroid fans that this was a Metroid game, they would agree with you. Over on Blackman and Robin.com, Justin Eccles wrote a review of the game, and he gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Another game that's coming to Steam in May is Final Fantasy IV, The After Years, which was a direct sequel to Final Fantasy IV. Square Enix has released a trailer that's just a fancy CGI cutscene at the beginning of the game. However, just like their Steam release of Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy IV The After Years is actually just a port of the mobile phone version of the game. And it is a very ugly port. Seriously, a few screenshots have been released, and it's disappointing to look at. It's understandable that a mobile game has to be scaled down for a cell phone's architecture. That said, releasing the same game for much more powerful PCs isn't really acceptable. Looking at the textures in the game, it would have barely been acceptable for a PlayStation 1. The textures on the game's environments, on the characters' clothing, and for their faces are really, really pixelated and ugly. I should not be able to pick out individual pixels from the ultra-low resolution anti-aliasing, and yet that's exactly what I'm able to do with these screenshots. Besides the ugly low-resolution textures, however, everything just looks very flat. There isn't nearly enough contrast between the characters, the environments, or the objects. I suppose that's the reason why the trailer that Square Enix released doesn't have any gameplay footage, because it would be hideous. What's funny is that a WiiWare version of the game was released some years back, and it looks significantly better than the version of the game that they're trying to pass off for the PC. Also, the WiiWare version used 2D sprites. The WiiWare version looked a lot more like a high-quality SNES RPG than a cheap PS1 game. While we're talking all things Steam, we might as well mention a couple of the big things that happened on everybody's favorite digital distribution platform. First off, there's now a sign-up form available for developers to sign up for the HTC Vive Developer Edition. The thing is, however, you can't sign up to purchase an HTC Vive Developer Edition outright. Valve's upcoming virtual reality headset is currently free, but only for select developers that Valve so chooses. It's not yet available for general sale. The reason for this is so that some games will be available for the HTC Vive when it comes out later this year. I suppose this all relates to Valve's internal philosophy of not releasing things to the public until they're in an acceptable form. While it is a little bit funny that it's not yet available for any developer to just purchase, I am hoping that Valve sends some free Vives to some smaller indie developers. This week, Valve incited a bit of controversy by making it possible to sell mods on the Steam Workshop. Now, in case you're unfamiliar with the idea of mods, all you need to know is that it's short for modification. People have been making modifications for video games for a very long time. These modifications have led to some very interesting things. For instance, the massive and well-loved video game Dota 2 was born out of Defense of the Ancients, which was a mod for the game Warcraft. This mod changed the way that Warcraft was played in a few fundamental ways. The mod was worked on and refined over the years by a number of fans with technical knowledge. Eventually, Valve picked up the mod and developed it as its own standalone game, which became Dota 2. The thing is, the overwhelming majority of game mods are completely and utterly free. Now, these modifications can be just about anything, from a modification that adds a new kind of armor to Skyrim, to a modification that gives Skyrim's mudcrabs posh accents and cute little top hats and monocles. There are also modifications that massively expand upon games, adding new quests, characters, and sometimes fully voice-acted segments. There's even an incredibly ambitious modification for Skyrim that looks to rebuild the world of Morrowind, a previous Elder Scrolls game, within Skyrim. As you may guess, lots and lots of work goes into these mods. It does make sense that the creators of mods should be able to profit from them. However, there are several thorny issues around the idea. To begin with, if you look at the current state of the video game industry, something that's a big focus for some of the larger players in the industry is DLC that's cosmetically focused. After all, cosmetic DLC does make a lot of money, and modifications just might be cutting into that money. After all, why would players purchase an extra sword for Skyrim that's nothing more than a shiny bauble when they can have a free modification that's essentially the same thing. I can definitely understand the modding community's trepidation at the idea that a bunch of people are going to wind up creating mods just to get into it for the sake of the money, rather than for the sake of the hobby. Then, too, are some legal issues involved. Because modding has always been such a free hobby, mod developers tend to share each other's work. It's pretty common for a mod to combine multiple mods in order to create something new. It's a wonderful remixy sort of culture, but what happens when a mod that combines other mods goes up for sale? Right now, Valve doesn't seem to have enough guidelines or screening for the sake of mods. What happens when your favorite video game begins trending and suddenly somebody sees it as a potential for profit rather than for a place to make something creative happen? What happens when the marketplace for mods becomes flooded with useless trash? Personally, I'm not at all opposed to the idea of mods being sold. Counter-Strike, after all, started out as a Half-Life mod, so did Team Fortress. The original Team Fortress is currently available on Steam for purchase, so hey, why not other mods? If you work hard on something, and you've done it legally, you totally deserve to make money off of it. Hopefully, like with Steam Greenlight, which you may remember as being something of a disaster initially, Steam will roll out some changes that make commercial mods on the Steam Workshop a bit more palatable. Right now, however, there's been a lot of backlash. Up on change.org right now is a petition that calls for the removal of the paid content of the Steam Workshop. At the time of this being recorded, the petition has over 40,000 signatures. What do you think about these mods for sale? Is it a good idea, or is it going to cause more problems? Shoot us a tweet or hit us up on Instagram at Blackman and Robin with what you think. If we especially like what you have to say, we'll be sure to feature your comment on the next episode of Game News Update. Also, you'll receive a free Steam key for the game Waking Mars. Waking Mars, just in case you wanted to know, is available for Mac, PC, and Linux. Our winner from last week gave us reasons to be excited for the upcoming Star Wars Battlefront. CherryPie55, the serial winner around here, thought that the trailer was awesome, and the fact that there are lightsabers and Darth Vader is totally great. Well, congratulations, CherryPie55. You've won Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, a fantastic RPG from BioWare. Right now, the only game currently open for commercial mods is The Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, which Steam is currently holding a free weekend on. Speaking of The Elder Scrolls Online is coming to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and it's going to be 65 gigabytes at least. The game is so massive that it'll require a 15 gigabyte day one patch because the Blu-ray discs that it's being shipped on will only carry 50 gigabytes. If you've been looking to get into this game and you have a fraudulent internet connection, well, my condolences. Fresh gameplay footage of a super enigmatic 5734 L3R, or wait, I suppose that's pronounced Stealer, has just been unveiled. It's a very short clip of the enigmatic cyberpunk stealth hacking platformer game. Mind you, it's much better than nothing. Now this game has been anticipated for a very long time. We don't know very much about it right now, other than the fact that it'll have some very beautiful art, and it's set in a world made of puzzles run by robots. Peeking back over at Square Enix, they've just announced that they will be having their own conference at E3 2015. It's set to happen on June 16, and we can only speculate on what they'll be showing off. Chances are, however, it'll be the new Deus Ex, the new Tomb Raider, and quite likely some Final Fantasy XV related news, though we can't be completely sure. We're doing a lot of speculation this week, as Marvel and Telltale Games are going to be releasing a game sometime in 2017. There's no word on what the game's going to be. All we have is a logo. Because Telltale's games are so choice-oriented, maybe it'll be a Spider-Man game? After all, that seems to fit thematically. Perhaps you'll make the choice to save Uncle Ben, and the game will end right there. After all, if Spider-Man... Okay, yeah, sorry. Perhaps Blackman and Robin should invite a bit of speculation over what this Marvel Telltale game is going to be. I'm certainly in favor of the idea. Alright then, it's settled. At some point in the future, we'll be holding a Steam Key giveaway. In order to win, you'll have to speculate on what the Marvel Telltale game is going to be. Now, that giveaway isn't happening this week. this is the week for talking about Steam's paid mods. That said, this Marvel Telltale Steam Key giveaway will be happening sometime soon, so stick with us and keep an eye on Blackman and Robin. We just have to pick out a Steam Key now. Now, I do have a little bit of bad news regarding the upcoming World of Warcraft film adaptation. Universal has delayed the movie from March 11th, 2016 to June 10th, 2016. The film stars Travis Fimmel of Vikings fame, as well as Ben Foster, Toby Kebbell, Paula Patton, Dominic Cooper, and Ruth Negga. It would appear that the film's delay is more on account of marketing it as a summer movie than anything else. In somewhat stranger and completely unexpected news, there's going to be an Age of Empires 2 tournament happening. Qualifiers for this tournament, which is being called the WSVG World Championship, start on May 4th, 2015, and the finals are in the Maldives in September. There's a $10,000 grand prize. Considering how old Age of Empires 2 is, it is a little bit unusual to see such a big tournament happening. Considering the fact that Age of Empires 2 is beloved, however, it does seem to make sense on some level. Finally, I stumbled across the short, intense teaser for Rituals, an upcoming adventure game about the relationship between civilization and the environment. In the game, you're lost in the woods and you're trying to escape an erupting volcano, but then you're also exploring underground facilities and trying to understand the story, which is told through the game's environments and various puzzles. The whole thing looks very enigmatic, and it's definitely something that I'll be keeping an eye on. Well, that's it for this week's game news. Be sure to follow at Blackman and Robin on Twitter for all the latest game news, reviews, previews, and interviews. Be sure to follow me at Jordan_Cameron for my other views.